there, he offered me the job, and I said, I want to do it. I was 23 years old. I was ready to go. And before I left, he said, do you want to know how much you make? And I said, oh, yeah. And so he slid me a piece of paper, and underneath the paper said $6,000. And at that age and time, it didn't matter. I just wanted to work. I wanted to be in college athletics. And so many times now, if you focus on that alone, you're not going to have a successful career. So I was just very fortunate. This game has been going on since 1933. It's only been played away from campus 7 times. So I know a lot is being made about what's going to happen in the future, and I'll sort of bounce around a good bit, but I'm going to leave a good bit of time for Q&A at the end of this because there's so many things that are evolved around college sports in general, but we can touch on a lot of things. I'm a pretty open book here. But I think what's going to happen is, you've got, after this year's game, you have 2 more years left in the contract. 2 more years before the hopeful stadium is going to be under construction for the 26 and 27 games, okay, to where we can come back in 2028. So there are a lot of things in play right here, and I know the city officials are really working hard on the new stadium, the contract to get that done. Because frankly, if that doesn't get done, then obviously football is going to go away in Jacksonville as we know it today. I think if the Jags ever left, then college football games and the Gator Bowl game as well as the Georgia-Florida game would cease to exist here in Jacksonville. I was here back in the days before the Jags, and we all know what the stadium was like back in those days, and customer service really wasn't a big deal. Nobody really focused on that. It was just the game, and you had a stadium that was kind of in disrepair, but since the Jags have taken over, it certainly is a premier facility, but it needs some work. It's been 30 years or so, but for us to compete at the levels that we all want to compete in, that stadium really needs to be done. And I can't think of any alternative other than having that done, because I don't want Jacksonville to turn into a city that does not have that presence. We all know when the Jags are really playing well, we know how much fun it is. We know how much fun this game brings the community as well as the Gator Bowl game. Last year, our South Carolina-Notre Dame game was one of the most attended, the most watched, and the most anticipated games of all. So we want to see all these things happen. I guess the question of what's going to happen in that 2-year period. Where the Jags going to play? Where is our game going to go? We took a group down to Daytona 2 weeks ago to check Daytona Speedway out, and they can play a college football game in that facility, if you can imagine that. I had not been to Daytona Speedway in 30 years, and I was taken aback by the advancements they've made at that facility. But you can actually fit a football field on the infield. Wow. So just imagine playing on the infield of the Speedway. And by the infield, I mean not back where the lake is. I'm talking about between the pit road and the main grandstand. So that's one option. Our other option maybe is to go to Gainesville or go to Tallahassee. So those are all options that we're trying to play through, because I don't know about an option happening here in Jacksonville. There is some precedent here when the San Diego Chargers in the NFL were waiting on SoFi Stadium to be completed in Los Angeles. They played in a soccer facility at Home Depot Field. It sat about 35,000 people and did that for 3 years. So it can be done. I'm not really sure where that is. That's certainly being handled by people in much higher positions than I am, but we're waiting anxiously to see if anything locally can happen that could keep our game here in Jacksonville during those 2 years. If they play in Orlando, that's a non-starter for us. There's no way we would take the Gator Bowl to Orlando, Florida. They've got enough games there, and we just don't want to give them any advantage over us. So stay tuned. I don't know how quick all this happens. The negotiations might be messy, but I can't think of any alternative other than having the Jags in Jacksonville for a long, long time. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and I just hope everyone would support that effort there. A couple of things here about this game coming up. you know, it's called the world's largest cocktail party for a long, long time. And I'm trying to figure out how did they get that name, and found out that Bill Castells with the Jacksonville Times Union created that name back in the 50s. And, you know, we rocked along with it for a long time. And this is while I was at the University of Florida. If you remember, down at the Jacksonville Landing, we had consecutive years of where people lost their life down at the landing. And I remember the presidents got together, the athletic directors got together to try to de-emphasize the way alcohol was being really abused in these areas. So we've come a long, long way since those days. I know people are still going to call it that way, but I do think in this game especially that people have more respect for each other than perhaps any other game. You got 40,000 Bulldogs and 40,000 Gators. So many tailgate together. So many have been going to these games with the same people for so many years. And I just sense the tables are turning back in the days where there was a good bit of problems associated with the game. But I feel like there's much more mutual respect now. At least that's my take, and that's a good thing. And I think if we continue in that vein, this game is going to continue to be really one of only 3 remaining true neutral games. You've got Army-Navy this year is being played up at New England with the Patriot Stadium, and then you've obviously got the Red River rivalry in Dallas between Oklahoma and Texas. Now, both these rivalries will continue in the SEC next year. I think you'll always see Georgia play in Florida. I think you'll always see Texas play in OU. So is it going to be an 8-game schedule, 9-game schedule? Who knows? That's something that the athletic directors and presidents have to figure out. But regardless of the way you view it, the SEC is going to be extremely, extremely difficult to win next year once you add those 2 teams into this conference. So it's not going to get any easier for these coaches. You know, this game also has a Hall of Fame game, Hall of Fame that started back in 1995. And I'm really proud that this year, Mark Richt is going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. For those of you that don't know, Mark is struggling with Parkinson's now. If you see him on TV, you can notice he's slowed down a good bit, verbalizes outstanding, but he's slowed down a bit. But I'm so happy to see him going in the Hall of Fame. And you talk about tough things that you have to deal with when you're in leadership positions. And as athletic director, one of the toughest things that I had to deal with was making a coaching change after the 2015 football season. That Sunday morning at 8 o'clock when we met after the Georgia Tech game was a very, very difficult day because I'm sitting across from someone that I truly respected. A man of integrity. We all know the Mark Richt story about what a wonderful person he is, a great family man. But at the same time, I just had the feeling that Georgia could be better. And so when you make decisions like that, it certainly causes a lot of angst. As a matter of fact, I've told my wife to leave town for a week because it's going to be messy. And so a week later, we named the head coach, and the rest is kind of history there. But I still am really good friends with Mark. We still stay in touch, and I'm so happy he's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame this Friday at noon. You know, I mentioned Coach Eves in the very beginning, but all of our lives are centered around relationships. Two of the first people I met here in Jacksonville was William Milne from the Gilbo Committee and Eddie Smith, who works with a local bank, U.S. Bank, and we got our loan through Eddie at 1.5%. No, I'm just kidding. It's a lot better than it was now. But I appreciate them. It's good to see them and be able to break bread with them. But, you know, it's all about being able to be on the receiving end of so many amazing mentors. And I went down the list of individuals like Norm Carlson, Dan McGill, Vince Dooley, Jeremy Foley, Doug Dickey, Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer, maybe perhaps not from a mentor standpoint, but knowing him, the late Vince Dooley, Kirby Smart, but also, this is really interesting. I went through and tried to remember all the mayors and all the city contacts that I had worked with at the University of Florida from 77 through 92, and then, Georgia from 77 through 92, and Florida the next 18 years and the last 10 years of Georgia. But how about this? And I actually knew these individuals: Jake Godbolt, Tommy Hazuri, Ed Austin, John Delaney, John Payton, Albert Brown, Lenny Curry, and I'm looking forward to meeting our new mayor. But also contacts such names as Dan Lee, Rick Catlett, Steve Beebenow, Michael Sullivan, Michael Boda, Julian Barr, Stan Johnson, Brian Hughes, Mike Weinstein, Bill Harrell. Those are just a few of the names that we were able to cross paths, and they're all friends. I know a lot of them have passed on, but I really, really enjoyed meeting those people and feel very fortunate to have a historical amount of experience with these individuals. You talk about longest winning streaks for this game. The longest winning streak from Georgia. Guess how many years in a row? What's the longest winning streak Georgia's had? 6 years. 6 years in a row from 78 to 83. How about Florida? How many years in a row have they won the game? 7 times, from 96 during the Spurs. So, while Vince Dooley dominated the series, Steve Spurrier dominated the series. So both fans got to enjoy a great run there by both institutions. This is the last year that CBS will televise this game. CBS, Gary Danielson, and Brett Nessler, and the great Vernon Lundquist, their contract expires at the SEC after this year. And the money is just ridiculous. But the Disney family of channels will start to televise the game next year. I really think they'll keep the 3:30 time slot. I know we did play the game at night one year. It was in the 80s, and it was a nightmare. So I was talking with my friend Kurt Dargis at ESPN the other day about not only our game, but I said, what time are you going to play this game in the future? He says, well, we have a strict understanding that this game will always be played during the daytime. So I'm thinking 3:30 is going to be that prime spot. So I think that's great for everyone. I just can't imagine a night game, knowing the way things could turn out, giving everybody at RV Village and all these places a full data to get ginned up for a game. So hopefully it stays at 3:30. But I think you'll see, I kind of hate to see CBS go away, but they'll take the Big Ten games now, so they'll still keep that 3:30 window, but will either be on ABC or ESPN for the duration of this game. We're also, our contract, we have 3 years left on the Gator Bowl contract, and we have a team from the SEC and a team from the ACC. So we know we won't have South Carolina. I'm not sure South Carolina will be bowl eligible this year, much less be in our game. But we could not have Notre Dame here 2 years in a row. So those that follow the ACC, you've got a lot of really good teams that are still in play. And the SEC is always going to have a large number of teams. So, that's in play for the next 3 years. And once we go away for 2 years, wherever that is, then when we come back in 2028 with the new stadium and the renderings that I've seen and the conversations we've had with the Jaguars, this is going to be one of the best stadiums in the world. And I think that's something that we can all take a tremendous amount of pride, because we have to understand who our competition is, especially in the bowl industry, is Nashville and Charlotte. We've all been to probably both those cities and see how they have been able to take advantage of the downtown environment with a stadium within walking distance. I know Nashville, you have to cross the river, but still there's a way to get there, and we all have had a lot of fun, I'm sure, in Nashville before. But that's who we're up against, and I think in 28, it's not just going to take a stadium, but it's going to take a lot of other things to happen for Jacksonville to be in a position to elevate our bowl game. So we're trying to put those things in play now. We're trying to be sure we communicate with all the major players to make sure that we're going to have a premier game, something that can really, really make everyone proud of everything we're doing. This not tip-off, but kickoffs, 3:30. I think you've got two really good teams. I think Florida has surprised everyone. I think going in, they felt like Graham Mertz was the worst quarterback in the SEC. But if you watched any play in the SEC, some of these teams that aren't very successful, I think you'd have to put him up in the upper echelon because of the way he's managed a game. I hate it that kids get put down so much before a season starts because all that does is ramp them up to do great things. You know, we all like to pull for the underdogs. Same thing with Georgia. It's just wonderful to see Carson Beck at quarterback. That young man has sat on the bench for a long time and waited his turn. And he has his opportunity now, and I promise you, he's taking advantage of it. But how many times do you see a talented person on the college level not get playing time that first year? And the way college rules are now, they can leave the very next day. Matter of fact, you could have several players on each team this week play for the other team next year at the same game without any penalty, they can do what they want to do. So, I really was against that. I think a young person should have the opportunity to transfer, but I feel like there needs to be some meat on the bone to where if they sit out a year, that's the way it used to be. You used to have to sit out a year, which would discourage kids from leaving school. What has happened though is, I remember the first time this came up, I had a conversation with Kirby about what I would call tough love. I think we all have gone through times in our life to where we've had somebody that's really been on our butt pretty good, trying to correct our mistakes, trying to learn from those. And you used to could do that in college sports, and you still can to the right type of young individual. But right now, if you get too hard on a kid or their feelings get hurt, they can just say, "Coach, I appreciate it, but I'm out of here. I'm going to go play at school A or B." I don't know when these kids are learning their lesson, but during their college time, if they don't learn it then, I don't think they'll ever learn it in life. But sometimes you have to go through some tough situations to come out on the other side a lot better and a lot more mature. But I think that's the way college is now. The paste is out of the tube. As I've said, it's kind of hard to put it back in there. Same thing with name, image, and likeness. Those two things probably drove me out of being in the AD chair than anything else. I really enjoyed I would call it the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. workday, because you're interacting with probably 350 staff members. You've got 600 student athletes. You're really in a vibrant environment. And as you get older, your population stays the same. I mean, they're always 18 to 21 years old, and you always feel invigorated. But once these rules kind of kicked in, it really took, to me, the fun out of the work. Going to games, watching games. And so much of that was drawn into lawsuits, and you deal with everything you're dealing with now. Helicopter parents was probably one of the worst, to where if kids weren't getting their way, then you were going to get the phone call from the AD, and all I would say, "Have you talked to the coach?" They said no, and I said, "Well, you talk to the coach and then you talk to me." But I think that's just the way it is. Entitlements in play. I relish the days where young people would say thank you for either a training table meal or doing something from massage therapy or from mental health or academics. But nowadays, it's never enough. I used to have and I have it on my door of my office now, is the statement from President Roosevelt's: "Comparison is the thief of joy." Comparison is the thief of joy, because I would have a coach come in and say, "I need this, this, and this because Arkansas has it." I said, "Read that sign right there. Don't come in here with that." I said, "Tell me what you need. Tell me why you need it, and we'll figure out how to get it done." And I've always felt like that's the way to run your operation there. So I really wasn't a helicopter AD. I didn't have set meetings with coaches. I was around. If they needed me, I was accessible. But I think those are the things that created a lot of success in both programs. But, getting back to this game, it means so much to everyone. If you could have seen the line for RV Village on Monday to get in Tuesday morning, I mean, it's almost full now. So those people are going to be down there all week. And if you watch the TV shows in the morning, they've been parking with the same people for years. Their children are now getting to where they're bringing their RVs in. That's what makes this game so special. I would hate to see it go away to a home and home event. We did that in 94 and 95, I believe. And those games were just like any regular game. Wasn't anything special about them. I mean, if you're a Georgia fan, you hated it because Florida kicked Georgia's butt those 2 years. But I really think this comes into play. You know, I said a lot of this is all about money, and it really is, because you got to think about this. Football is the only sport that generates income more than their expenses. And at Georgia, we had 21 sports. One sport made money. So football has to support every other sport on your campus, okay? And what happens is, if you play this game here in Jacksonville, this is a quick financial picture of the way this works out. You have to look at it in 2-year increments, because if I'm playing the game in Athens 1 year, I'm going to net about $3 million. I'm going to net $3 million. I'm going to make more money. My gross is going to be pretty high, but I've got to pay for security. I've got 16,000 student tickets that are $10. I got faculty tickets that are half price, and I got a bunch of freebies, okay? The next year, when I have to travel to Gainesville, I have to pay for everything. Aircraft, buses, meals, hotels. It costs about $500,000, okay? So over that 2-year period, I've made $2.5 million. I've netted $2.5 million. I come down here every year, okay? The ticket revenue is split 50-50. So do the quick math. There are 40,000 seats for each school. 40,000, and let's just say ticket average is $80. Do the math. I get that every year. And on top of that, every year, the city kicks in about $1 million to pay for expenses. So like a guarantee. So the revenue generated is almost threefold by playing at a neutral site, because I got 40,000 tickets full price. Students pay the full price. There are no freebies. Everybody pays for every ticket. So as athletic director, that was always the reason that was probably the main reason you kept the game here. And as long as that cushion stays there, I think there's a great chance that this game will always be there, because football is never going to take the back seat. They're going to get the first dollar. But what happens to those other sports and what happens to your program? You're going to have to cut significantly. And even though you're working on budgets that are $170 and $180 million, that's a huge chunk of change to take out of your budget annually. So I don't know if they're going to home in 26, 27, or whether they're going to take the game to either Atlanta and Miami. I don't know what's going to happen. But I just know that it's important for us as the city of Jacksonville to get them back here in 2028 and beyond, because it's going to be a phenomenal stadium, something that you will not experience on either campus, because every seat will have a chair back to it. We all know what it's like to sit at Florida Field or Sanford Stadium and sit on that 18-inch plank if you're just a regular supporter. So with that, and I also wanted to congratulate everybody in this room for what you do. I feel very fortunate to be leading an organization that people opt in. They're not checking a box. And when you really care about something, you can tell automatically. I mean, I know when we have some committee members that, feel like they just have to be there, and they just have to be there for attendance. And they're kind of checking the box, okay? But the vast, vast majority of our people love to be there, and they want to. So just like I view you as a want to organization, you want to. It's not a need to, you want to. So I want to congratulate all of y'all for taking time out of your schedule to not only have a great lunch, but also to be huge members of this community and do great things for this. So I think you should be proud of yourselves, and we should all do more. Like in our organization, we could always do more, but what Rotary has always done has really kind of set the table for others. And I think you should all feel really great about what you're doing, because I've never sensed that people are just here just to be here. They're here because they want to, the way you participate. So I want to congratulate you on everything that you do to make our community better. That's all we're trying to do at the Gator Bowl with our charities, which is really, really growing. We also sponsor the Florida State baseball game in March. and obviously the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. So we're fortunate to have all those pieces in place and do the best we can to be great members of this community. But I know Williams you probably have a question now. I know you got to have a question.
I do, but I'm gonna let the others have the floor
Okay.
first. All right, go ahead.
Hey, Greg, it's great having you here, Izzy. Thank you. So, the Gator Bowl, and next year they go to expand the playoff to 12. Can you just quickly talk about that process of getting Gator Bowl in one of those games? Sure. Real quickly, what happened is you got 4 teams playing for the championship this year. Okay. Think about this. You could have 5 undefeated teams this year. You could have Georgia, Oklahoma, the Michigan, Ohio State winner, Oklahoma, I already mentioned them, and Washington, Florida State. Think about that 5th team that gets left out of there, okay? Next year, you go to 12 teams in the college football playoff. We talked about 4 out of the 5 teams. Think about teams that are ranked 10 through 15. So if I'm the 13th team that didn't get in, I probably got 1 or 2 losses. So how are they going to determine that? Who is going to make that decision? It's a group of individuals that sit in a room. They've got analytics that you can only imagine, but it gets down to kind of the eye test. So it's going to be interesting. What it does for us, it might take another team from the SEC out of play for our game. Because right now you've got the first 4 games next year, not this year, but next year will be played on campus. In other words, let's just say Florida's 5 and Wisconsin's a 12. That game will be played in Gainesville. 6 will play 11 at the home side of the 6-seeded team. And then they'll feed into really your New Year's Day 6 bowls. But you got the semifinals, you got your quarterfinals, which will take 4 bowls, like the Cotton Bowl, the Sugar, the Orange, the Rose. And then those winners will play in the semifinals, which will take the other 2 New Year's Day bowls. Because the final game is always played at a different site than the bowls. This year it's in Houston, I think. Yeah, this year it's in Houston. Last year it was in LA. The year before that was in Indianapolis. So we will not elevate into those New Year's Day bowl games. The only thing that could kick in is let's say that Notre Dame's a 5 seed and Miami's a 12 seed. I'm not so sure what the weather's going to be like in South Bend, Indiana, the week before Christmas. Number one, knowing how the pipes at Sanford Stadium freeze in cold weather. It's not a winterized stadium. So you've got some dynamics there to where they possibly could play those games at bowl sites, like the Gator Bowl. In other words, those first 4 games that are played on campus sites, they're going to do that for at least 2 years. So it could be that in 2026, we wouldn't be available then because our stadium wouldn't be ready. But in 2028, it could be that Notre Dame Miami game could be played here, or they may say, let's take that game to Indianapolis inside. So it doesn't really elevate us. It may take a team out that's playing in the top 12. Hope that makes sense. It's just kind of confusing.
Hey, great to have you here.
Thank you.
I grew up south of Chicago and just old enough to remember when the Chicago Bears played in Wrigley Field for their home games. So any consideration of using the Jumbo Shrimp Ballpark for both the college games and maybe the Jaguar home games?
We would love that. The expense you would have, and right now they're adding 15,000 temporary, not 15. They used to add 15,000 temporary seats in the Gator Bowl for everybody. You can do anything you want to do, as we've seen at TPC. You can add any amount of seats that you want to add. It just depends on the cost. Now, the standards for the NFL would be greatly different than the standards for our game. So that's why I'm thinking everything's on the table. Is that an option for the Jags to use? I'm not sure. But I think they're exploring every opportunity to keep this game here, because those 2 years, Trevor will be in his 7th year. Really going to be good. Really going to be good. And I hate to see those games not being played locally, to where somebody else is benefiting off of that rather than everyone here in Duval County.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question regarding the Gator Bowl as far as since the playoff was instituted, it feels like there's been a de-emphasis on bowl games, period, just across the country. I feel like even when I was younger, if you made it to a bowl game, that was a big deal. And now you see a lot of guys sitting out. Is there any consideration, I guess, in helping to re-emphasize and kind of get some of these players to play, or is that something where it feels like the toothpaste is out of the tube and not be able to get it back in? And then one other follow-up question on that is obviously the SEC did expand. So so even though there may be a loss on the playoff, there's going to be more teams to choose from. Is that something you think will benefit the Gator Bowl moving forward?
No question about it, because Oklahoma and Texas are going to nudge somebody out. In the middle of the road teams, let's just say the top level right now is probably LSU, Georgia, and Florida. LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. You know, Oklahoma and Texas are probably going to be in that stratosphere. So it's going to knock teams that are right underneath that umbrella: Tennessee, Kentucky, Ole Miss. And I don't mean to demean any of those schools, but our pool is going to get significantly stronger. Also in the ACC, they had Stanford. Well, they aren't really football powers, okay? Stanford, Cal. I'm sure they bring a lot of fans to Jacksonville, and SMU. So much more on the SEC side as far as strength of team. I think the ACC will be just as strong at the top, not at the bottom, because you're bringing in some teams. I've always felt like that, you know, you can have 85 young men on scholarship, and everybody usually has about 40 walk-ons, okay? So there's 120, 25 kids that are dying to play football, minus those that want to go on and not get hurt, not playing the game to damage their NFL possibilities. I really don't worry about it, because I've always felt like a second, third, or fourth stringer having that chance to play. I mean, if you did the math on how much time these young people spend on their craft, think about strength, all the weightlifting they do, spring practice, just to get, think about this. I mean, some of those kids never get to play in a game. And so if they have a chance to play, they're going to give you an incredible effort. So I always feel like you're going to get a great game because people want to play in the game. If you don't want to play, just stay home. And so you're going to have some of that. I even saw it where one person was recommending that Caleb Williams go ahead and sit out the rest of the season for USC because they're not in contention for one of the playoff spots. You know, that's almost like saying, I think the young man likes to play football with his friends. And also, it's the last time that these young people will ever be together as a team. So it's all dependent on how the head coach approaches the game. If it's not important to the head coach, you'll see that from the kids. Okay, it's just like us. If we're having difficult times and we kind of come in the office moping around and doing this, what's our staff going to think? Oh man, what's wrong with him? So, you know, probably everybody in this room doesn't realize it. But and everyone's in a leadership role in this room. I promise you, those people that are working for you or around you are watching everything you do. They're watching body language. They're seeing how you dress. They're seeing how you approach everything, because as a young person, I saw how different people reacted to different situations. And there are a lot of times where I say, you know what, when it's time for me to run my shop, I'm not going to act like that. I'm going to act the way this mentor taught me to act. So I think it's up to a head coach to send the message on how important it is, because there's always, as they say, there's always tape. And the NFL scouts every game, and they're watching everything they do. And one of the most popular resources for NFL scouts to talk to is the equipment manager. The equipment manager. How do they treat the little guys? And you'll see a lot of that in the NFL, because they're 53, they can dress 53, and I guess they've got travel squad. You know, it's the owner's money. There's no donor money involved in NFL. So they're watching everything they do. And if they're dogging it in the game, or they're not interacting with their kids, or not showing leadership, those kids probably have no shot to play in the NFL. So I think it's important, and every snap is important, but I think you'll always have some that pull out. Notre Dame had 2 kids that pulled out last year. I think Carolina had 3 or 4. Didn't affect the game. One hell of a game. So It's gonna happen from time to time. One more and then we'll call it a day.
You
Yes, sir.
mentioned all the benefits to having the Georgia-Florida game here, the financial benefits for each school, for the city, and the fact that it's a fantastic game. Does Kirby really want to go home and home? He's mentioned that before because he's losing a weekend of recruiting. Like, does that really matter, Kirby?
Yeah, you've struck a nerve in me. I've had the conversation with Kirby before. He's a finance major. He gets it. And I said, Kirby, I'll never disagree with your concept. It's important for you to recruit on campus. Okay. He's done pretty well with it, but I did draw a map one time of about a 2-hour radius around Jacksonville and a 2-hour radius around Athens. And at one time, the University of Georgia had more kids within a 2-hour radius of Jacksonville. You count South Georgia, Jacksonville, and all these things. And he didn't care about that. Okay. I cared about it. I thought it was a speaking point. He gets it because he knows football is always going to get it. But I always said for 3 days, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, over a 2-year span, I don't think it's going to make a difference. And if you listen to these recipients of the Hall of Fame, they honor 4 people a year, 2 for Florida, 2 for Georgia. To hear them talk about their times driving over that Hart Bridge and seeing the seas of orange and blue and red and black, you don't get that on campus. We all saw what it's like on campus. It's just different. That's what makes this game great. And that's why I think it needs to stay here. And trust me, I'm going to do everything I can. But Kirby's kind of toned down because he's focused on the game. And it'll come back up again. But I will say this, I think it puts pressure on the athletic directors to play those 2 games at home, even though they're going to lose their shirt financially. But we'll see. Stay tuned.
Greg, on that note, who are the other recipients for the Hall of Fame this year? I'm thrilled that Mark Rick is being inducted. So well deserved. But do you know the other recipients?
I know Marino is one for Georgia. I'm not sure the other 2. I guess I should know that. I'm not sure. Terrence Edwards?
And Bubba Little?
No, the two Georgia are Mark and
Lindsey Scott.
Lindsey's already in. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Lindsey's
That's why y'all need to come to the event and see us. Thank y'all. Thanks so much.
On behalf of the club, just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you. I noticed, as an SEC guy, how you tried to leave Florida State out of the defeated conversation. That didn't go unnoticed. But no, your time is very much appreciated. It's so great to hear about these things from an insider who's been through it and can give accurate information about what's actually going on. It was really great. Couple of quick announcements. Next week, there'll be no lunch meeting. Again, we'll be here for a social at 5:30. Certainly, everybody is welcome, and we hope our folks from Riverside will join us as well. Join us again on November 8th, right here, when the speaker will be Larry Lunsford from the Rotary Foundation. So I'd like to ask now that Dr. Randy Thornton lead us in the four-way test.
Please join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, second, and fourth.
Thank you again for joining us, and let's go make the world a better place.